Welcome to the CCFR Radio Podcast, your source for news, updates, and stories from the CCFR.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 108 of the CCFR Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Rod Giltack, and thanks for joining me again. Today on the podcast, I got a huge show for you. So I'll have Wilson on as usual. We're going to talk about what a crazy country we live in, full of crazy people doing crazy stuff. As you well know, because if you've been alive for the last week or so, there's a lot of crazy things going on out there. So we're going to cover some of that stuff. And I'm also going to bring on a special guest, which is Mike Loberg, who's the general counsel of the CCFR. And he's going to explain what's going on with these Section 74 challenges. Now, I just recorded that conversation, and it's really complex. And it's long. It's like 20 minutes of legal jargon. So I think I even say it in the interview. What I would do is if you're really, really interested, you're going to get all the detail you wanted, right? Like I don't explain this stuff because I don't understand it completely myself either. Okay. So if you want the, in detail legal explanation about why the CCFR has taken the position that it has, why, what you should do, maybe if you're curious, we can give you some information. You can help make your decision. But anyway, you wanted it. I got it for you. It's very complex. What I would recommend is if you don't understand it, put the video back and watch it twice, because I'm probably going to watch it twice myself so that I understand it. Okay. So anyway, it was really great to have Mike on, and he's a very busy lawyer. He's a very successful lawyer, but he always makes time for the CCFR, which we really appreciate. So you can check that out as well. Anyway, but before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Vortex, the force of optics. Really like to thank our great friends over at Vortex Canada for continuing to support the podcast. We really appreciate all their help. You can check out all their great products at vortexcanada.net. That's vortexcanada.net. And of course, our great friends over at the Saskatchewan Rivers chapter of Safari Club International. They do great work over there. We really appreciate all their help and the help that they're giving gun owners by continuing to support the podcast. You can check out all of their stuff over at saskriversSCI.com. I'd recommend you check them out. They're a great group. saskriversSCI.com. Okay, now, I've got a couple of things to cover with you briefly. I want to try to make this as quick as I can because we have about 43 minutes worth of group talk in this episode, and I don't want to hold you up too long. So my voice is a little messed up right now. Our whole family's getting over COVID or a bad flu or whatever it is that went around, but it had the ripping headache. I don't get headaches typically. And I had a headache so bad for about a day and a half, maybe 2 days, I was actually squirming around. So I think it was COVID, the Omarian, the Omicron, the Amarillion, whatever you want to call it this time around. But whatever it was, it ran through the whole family, and we're all recovering, and we all made it through. So that's the good news. But anyway, it set me back a little ways. I had some other things I wanted to get done that had to wait till I got better. One of those things, I can announce to you that the CCFR's co-production with WOW TV for CCFR Radio on the Air, our new television show on WOW TV, I have a signed contract now. We finally got that done, and it's inching forward. So when the premiere is, I can't really tell you. I don't really know. But right now, like each episode is going to have an interview in it. And I'll be conducting those interviews here pretty quick. I'm scheduling them all as we speak, having some success in that, which is great. But it's inching forward. So I'm hoping that you'll see the first episode in the next couple of weeks. As I said, there was a variety of different things that happened that pushed it back. And this is why I don't like to announce things until they're actually done. And I'm really close to being able to produce an episode for you before I would mention anything. But anyway, I kind of broke my own rule and then ended up with a lot of pressure on me as a result of that. So anyway, look forward to that. I'll let you know when the first episode is going to be airing on WOW TV, and you can check that out. If to add some pressure, when I say I mean my involvement in the Mass Casualty Committee is now ramping up now. So we're heading into phase 2. I know it's taken almost 2 years, but I was just as surprised as anybody else at the amount of information that had to be obtained and cataloged and made available in a searchable database to everybody involved in the investigation. I've never seen anything like it. It really is an incredible undertaking, and that's why it takes so long, because even with a really large group of people with government funding, it's a Herculean task to get all this information and then condense all of that down to a verifiable set of foundational documents, which is the foundational documents are basically what really happened, the timeline, everything, all anchored by fact and other documents, right, to make sure that it's accurate. And anyway, it's a tremendous undertaking. I haven't had to do anything basically on it, but now my involvement is going to ramp up, and I'm responsible to be part of a bunch of different things in there. But what the upside for you is, I know there's a lot of people in our country for a variety of reasons that are interested in what's going on at the Mass Casualty Committee, and you want some information now to be made public. They are making information public, and I'll do my part by alerting you to that information, maybe posting links within these videos where you can read the foundational documents and stuff. So you'll be able to see what we have verified as true. And when I say we, I mean them. I haven't done anything to deserve any recognition whatsoever on that project yet. Not yet, but I'm hoping to. But anyway, while that's ramping up, and there's a lot of commitments for participants as well, we've got the TV show and every other project that we've got going on, all ramping up at the same time. So thank goodness I'm feeling better, because I'm gonna need my energy. So that's what's going on with the MCC. Also, the CCFR et al. Versus Canada case is pushing forward. So again, instead of asking like what's going on with the court case, you can go to propertyjustice.ca, propertyjustice.ca. There's, when we asked you to help us sue the government in grand fashion, not with a tiny legal team or a single guy or whatever, with an entire firm of constitutionally experienced lawyers, we asked you to fund that. You did. You continue to fund it. We need you to continue to fund it, because I just got an invoice for almost $200,000 for the last 6 weeks. When you fund that, you deserve to see everything that's going on in the case. So we created that website, propertyjustice.ca, again, where you can go there, see what the court schedule is, and see all the documents as they're produced, as they're able to be made public. We upload them there. So there's no new documents from the last time I mentioned, but the reason why I'm bringing it up is the court schedule is maybe a couple weeks behind. We're actually doing quite well in comparison to other court cases that are large and complex like this, especially when the government is behaving in the way that it has, where it's like, we're not giving any evidence. Okay, now we're giving evidence. And so now they've dumped a whole bunch of affidavits, which our legal team has to actually go through line by line, verify what's true and what isn't, verify what we want to question these affiants on, because if you don't question them on stuff, it stays on the record and the judge can decide whether it's true or not. You don't want them leaving it to them. You want to dispute whatever needs to be disputed. Well, that is a tremendous task, because some of these affidavits are 400 pages, right? They're really long, and there's a lot of stuff. And I mean, it's been a lot of work for me to go through them as well, to make sure I'm like, this person isn't an expert in that. That's not true. Make sure that you set them on fire for that. This is not true. Also, here's the real information. Make sure you confront them on that as well. So, this all gets really, really expensive. My time's covered obviously by the CCFR, but when we're asking partners of a large law firm like JSS to spend time, and because we only get one shot at questioning these people, you only get one shot at it. So they only had one shot at questioning me. They didn't question me about much. We don't want them to get the same benefits. So you got to make sure that you do it right, no matter what it costs. So that's why we're in the situation that we're in. Anyway, so the court schedule still looks pretty good. Maybe we're 2 weeks behind or whatever. So you can check that out on propertyjustice.ca. And there's no new documents there now, but there will be probably within the next few weeks, because we cross-examined the government's witnesses, and those transcripts are coming to us now. And as the transcripts come to us, we get permission from our legal team to put them up to the public so that you can read what's going on. And I'll tell you this, there was one in particular that was extremely entertaining. And I'm not going to mention, I don't want to prejudice anybody by saying who it was or why I think it was entertaining, but it was pretty awesome. So that transcript, maybe I'll do one of these like that one, for you later, so you can understand which one I'm talking about. But it's coming. The transcripts are coming, and I'll alert you to that when they're up there and available. You can go there and you can download them and read them. But pretty awesome. I wish that we were allowed to have the video, that we were allowed to record it and publish it, because it was very entertaining. Anyways, all that to say, I've talked long enough. We've got all kinds of more important stuff to talk about. But I'm going to bring on Mike Loberg right now, and then we'll head over and talk to Wilson after. All right, on Skype, I've got Mr. Michael Loberg, General Counsel of the CCFR, which is a great honor. How's it going, Mike?
Rod, I'm doing fine. Delighted to be with you again today. How are you, sir?
I'm squeaking by. You know, funny thing, I was when we were trying to get the Skype going, I looked at your the last Skype meeting we had, which means that we did a podcast together, and it was almost 1 year ago. So far too long.
We should, in fact, do this more frequently.
Yeah. All right. Just to get started, because it's there's a lot of things going on today. We want to talk about the Section 74 challenge issue. As you know, it was an issue when it came up. You know, the CCFR can't do absolutely everything for everybody. We chose to wait on the Section 74 challenges and see what was going to happen there while we focused on other things. But it's been brought up again because there was I guess what some people would consider a minor victory. And I don't understand all this stuff. So you came on to kind of give us the lay of the land and kind of where we sit on that issue.
Absolutely. The Section 74 is a really interesting provision that's getting a lot of play following the Order in Council firearm ban. Now, I'll start with the usual provisos that nothing that I'm about to say should constitute legal advice. And of course, it's a horrifically complicated area of law, so I'm going to glaze over some areas and leave a few portions out. So to the extent that you see things that are missing or you have questions, that's necessarily true because I can't cover everything here. And if you want to, please consider going over to CCFR Answers on Facebook, post any questions there, we can deal with that. And Rod will provide some details as to the website where you can get some more information on CCFR versus Canada. But touching on the Section 74, when the Order in Council was issued on May 1st, banning a bunch of firearms, what happened next was the Registrar for Firearms issued a bunch of letters which purported to be nullification notices regarding the registration certificates for our affected firearms. The CCFR, of course, looked at this and considered what the options were, and there are some interesting procedures underway and some interesting problems that are going on right now. We'll start at the beginning. What is the Section 74? Well, that's the ability of a Canadian citizen who has a firearm license, a registration certificate, or something of that nature to do with a firearm who has it either revoked or refused to be issued by the registrar, to challenge that in front of a provincial court judge in order to have that reviewed as to whether or not that decision, that revocation, or the refusal to issue is proper. Now, a number of people chose to do that with respect to the letter that was received. Now, just touching on the letter, those letters were largely dated July 20th, 2020, and said, and I'll quote that here, certain restricted firearms which were registered to you have been affected by the recent regulatory amendments. These firearms listed below are now classified as prohibited, and the previous registration certificates are automatically nullified and are therefore no longer valid, but should be retained as historical registration record. So the registrar is taking the position that these things have been automatically nullified. And of course, just to get that out of the way, there's absolutely nothing in the Act or in the regulations which purports to do that. There are some provisions in other circumstances which do provide for automatic nullification, but nothing that does it for this. So it's a bit of a stretch for the government to be saying that they can just send out a letter saying it's automatically nullified by operation of law. Notwithstanding, a great many jurisdictions in Canada, and this is being determined on the provincial level, the provincial court judges have, most jurisdictions have said that that's exactly what happened. It was a automatic nullification, and therefore those courts are saying they lack the jurisdiction to have a hearing to determine whether or not there's been a mistake made in those Section 74, in those revocation decisions. Now that gets to an interesting and complicated problem as to whether or not there has in fact been a decision to revoke those registration certificates. Obviously, they didn't revoke themselves. Somebody did that. In the course of the litigation that's happening presently before the provincial courts, it's come out that the firearms program have been using an automated algorithm in order to have the database searched to look for affected firearms and have those letters generated automatically. So the question is, was there a decision being made? And the lawyers are arguing, yes, there was. It was made by whoever programmed that algorithm. Now, that algorithm is going to be produced, so we should be seeing that in due course in some of the actions. So, yeah, so we'll have a bit more information on that. Now, the question arises, were these things administratively expired or not? So we get into a three-part fight, and I think that a lot of the people who are looking at these Section 74s are focusing on the immediate thing that's in front of them and not looking at the big picture. And the big picture is important because it's actually not one fight, it's three fights. First is the right to be heard, because a lot of courts are saying, you don't have a right to be heard. We don't have jurisdiction to do this because it was automatic, it was administrative, it was by operation of law or something of that nature. If we get past that, we're going to get into the second fight, which is the actual Section 74 argument of whether or not the revocation, well, then there is, at least some courts are saying that it was a revocation, but in any event, we'll fight about whether or not, or the people who are doing this will fight about whether or not there were proper grounds for a revocation of those registration certificates. That's the second fight. And the third fight, of course, is the order in council challenge, which CCFR versus Canada is running in federal court, amongst some other challengers, of course. That fight is going to determine whether or not the order in council was lawful, whether or not it can stand, whether or not it was constitutional or administratively improper from an administrative law review process. Now, here's where the interaction of those points go. Right now, the fight is all about, do they have the right to be heard? And now that's a noble fight. And I want to pause there to say that, some people have run into this thing, Ian Runkle amongst others. The Stark case, which is being run here in Alberta, is also certainly worthy of note, because those cases got on the front end of this thing to argue that they in fact do have the right to be heard as a Section 74 challenge. And nicely in the Stark case, Justice Fradsham, who's a very well thought of provincial court judge here in Alberta, decided that there was going to be a hearing. He did have jurisdiction to have that. In a different case, in Ian Runkle's own case, Judge McDonald up in Edmonton decided that he did not have jurisdiction to hear that. So we've got in Alberta even conflicting decisions as to whether or not there was or was not jurisdiction. The latest thing that's happened, which has caused the buzz in our community, is on January 21, 2022, Mr. Justice Pullman affirmed Judge Fradsham's determination that he had jurisdiction and said, yes, in fact, the provincial court judges do have jurisdiction, and he sent that case back down for hearing. Now, that's going to overrule Judge McDonald's determination that he did not have jurisdiction to hear Ian Runkle's case, so Ian Runkle could have an automatic win on his appeal to get jurisdiction to have his case heard. Stepping back to the bigger picture, now we've got Queen's Bench level decisions, or a Queen's Bench level decision in Alberta that says that there is jurisdiction to have these Section 74 applications, and we've got a bunch of decisions from other provinces that says that they don't. So when we have conflicting laws or conflicting decisions in different provinces, inevitably that's the sort of thing that the Supreme Court of Canada is going to sort out as to which province got it right and which province got it wrong. Ultimately, I would think that there's going to be a determination at the Supreme Court of Canada. My personal belief is that Judge Fradsham got it right and there is jurisdiction, but we'll find out one way or the other. As that is winding its way up to the Supreme Court of Canada, we're going to see probably one of the cases being heard in Alberta were under the Stark umbrella, and there's a few cases running under that umbrella that was just affirmed for hearing, and they can have their Section 74 argument. Now, again, pausing, that's a good thing, because these people have gone out and fought for the right to have that hearing in an environment where the government is actively trying to deny our rights to have recourse to the courts to say, look, court, the government got this wrong, they made a mistake and they're hurting me, I want you to make them stop. The government is saying, no, we don't want to have the courts reviewing us when we're doing things of this nature. Now, that's just fundamentally wrong. So I'm very glad to have these right to be heard cases heard. But we can then get on to the next problem, the second fight of the actual Section 74 fight, when the applicants stand up before the court and say, look, I'm objecting to the fact that they revoked my license properly or improperly, and it was improper because it didn't include the necessary Section 74 information in the notice of revocation. they're going to say to the judge, I want this thing set aside on the basis that it wasn't properly done. They might win that, in which case the government might have to send these notices out all over again. Now, just parking that aside, that's going to let you have, when you receive one, if you're in the queue to get one, a proper restarting of your time period, because there's a 30-day window for doing these applications, a restarting of the time period for you to actually kickstart a Section 74 application if you want to bring one yourself. Meanwhile, this current batch of applications are going to stand up before provincial court judges, and regrettably, and I don't know of any lawyers who are involved that hold a different opinion, regrettably, they will win the right to have the hearing, but they're going to lose the hearing, because for so long as the order in council stands, it is a perfectly justifiable reason for those registration certificates to be revoked. So that gets us on to the third fight, CCFR versus Canada. That is fighting to set aside the order in council on a variety of different grounds. Anybody who comes with a Section 74 application after that wins, presuming it does, or we have a change in government that renders that problem moot by getting rid of the order in council. Anybody who comes up the pipe after that, when CCFR versus Canada wins and the order in council has been struck down, can then stand up in front of the provincial court judge with the actual Section 74 challenge and have the judge say, yes, this is improper because the grounds for it no longer exist. To wit, the OIC has been struck down. Until that happens, the people who are bringing Section 74 applications should be unsuccessful in the ultimate application. So where does that leave us? My recommendation, again, this isn't advice, just a recommendation, is that, which is, by the way, this is what I'm doing, is everybody who's standing here with registration certificate letters saying that they've been administratively expired should just stand around and wait. And when Ian Runkle and the Stark, Greg Dunn, and his crew and Mr. Miller have their applications brought forward and actually affirmed, probably at the Supreme Court level, that we do have the right to have these things heard. And if the order in council has been set aside by CCFR versus Canada, we can then en masse go and file our applications at that point in time, bring on Section 74 applications following the trails that these people have blazed for us, and we'll win. Until then, my argument is that it's premature, because there's no point in rushing into a Section 74 application that you're guaranteed to lose. But for the fact that this case does need to go to the Supreme Court of Canada to have a determination that we do have that right. And those cases are being brought presently by perfectly competent counsel. So I see no need for anyone else to rush in to try to do that.
Well, all that is really complex. So what I would do is I would encourage anyone that's listened to that. I know it was long, but set the video back and listen to it again and try to follow through that whole chain of events. So I think one of the things that you can take away from this is that it's not simply a matter of, I'm going to go file this thing and get in front of a judge and flood the courts and all the rest of that stuff. There's a lot more to this whole fight, and a lot more levels, I think, than anybody really realized.
It certainly is a massively complicated area of law. We're administratively reviewing a case where the constitutionality of the provisions are in play. I don't know whether or not you want any further technicalities, Rod, but I mean, just to throw that in there, in order to win a Section 74 application where there's an order in council, the applicant would effectively have to run the same argument that CCFR versus Canada is running in the federal court presently and win, and have the order in council declared not to apply to that particular applicant. And then they could win that Section 74 application. Now, under Canadian Constitution, that's virtually impossible. Provincial court judges don't have constitutional authority to strike down legislation. All they have is the ability to declare it of no force and effect vis-a-vis the person who's in front of them at that moment. And even that's highly unlikely. And courts have said that they don't have that authority. Provincial courts have said that they don't have that authority. So under the Constitution, it really is a matter of letting CCFR versus Canada knock down the order in council, and then we can swarm them with Section 74 applications that are going to, at that time, win. Right.
Well, I guess we'll see. So it's a very long process, obviously, and it's complex, and that's one of the reasons why when there's a decision like that to be made, like I wait and I talk to people and I think about it. I don't just run and do these things, because sometimes you can actually create harm as well. I would imagine that there's some impact with the buyback. Should a buyback get rolled out, there could be an impact where you actually don't have a registration certificate to bring with your firearm to get your money if it ever got that far, correct?
Well, there's a reasonable chance that you'd probably be recognized as being entitled to a buyback. But I mean, there is a much more dangerous aspect to it, Rod, and you're heading in the right direction. The people who have their Section 74 applications heard before the OIC is struck down will have a final determination by a court of competent jurisdiction that they do not have a registration certificate. Now, if we can harken back to the age of Whitmore, 2008, where there was a case involving the prohibited firearms, where a certain category of people, there was legislation which was supposed to preserve their registration certificates and licenses during an interval, but it wasn't declared in force and effect at the required time, so they didn't actually qualify for the grandfathering. And the courts reviewed that and found that because of the operation of the effectively defective legislation, they did not have registration certificates on the date that a grandfathering was declared in force, and therefore they were not entitled to it. And about 122 applicants lost their rights to their firearms because they did not have a registration certificate on the date that grandfathering was granted to them. Now, the people who are in the in the Section 74 stack right now are looking at the same sort of thing. If they actually have a hearing and the court declares that their registration certificates are in fact revoked, that's it. They're revoked. They're gone. And if this is a big if a grandfathering scheme comes up later, which is similar to every other grandfathering scheme the government has ever done, which says if you have a license and a registration certificate on a specified date, you are hereby grandfathered, there's a good chance that none of those people are going to be qualified to get that, and they'll be in the same category as those 122 people who lost on the short handgun problem back in 2008. So, the people who are in the Section 74 stack right now are boldly going where they needed to go in order to make sure that we had the right to have these cases heard, the jurisdictional issues. But they're running a fairly high risk of an adverse decision, which could have some fairly significant consequences for them. So again, what I'm doing is I'm waiting. I'm waiting until CCFR versus Canada wins, so I don't find myself in a Whitmore circumstance of seeing a grandfathering coming down the pipe for which I do not qualify because I've already lost my reg certs. If somebody waits, right now, effectively the reg certs are they haven't received proper notice that they've been expired, so arguably they still exist, and if the OIC is reversed, then to be certain they will still exist. But a Section 74 application which finds as a matter of law that they don't exist right now would probably not be reversed by the cancellation of the order in council in CCFR versus Canada. So it's a pretty big risk.
Well, I can't pretend to understand all that, but like I said, you can rewind the video, listen to it again, and if I did, I probably would understand it. I just it takes me at least 2 times to figure that stuff out. But I think the important thing is I really appreciate you coming on to kind of work through a lot of that stuff, because people send me questions and they ask me questions, and I just, there's no way that I can articulate what's going on to that level of detail. So yeah, I really appreciate it. That's for sure.
Well, I'm happy to do it, Rod. And I'll remind the listeners that CCFR Answers is a page in Facebook associated with the CCFR group. I write opinions. Well, I shouldn't say opinions. I write informational posts and blogs about matters for firearms, and I post them there. And in fact, I've got at least 2 or 3 on this very point in there. And we'll be happy to answer some questions over there if you want, or alternatively, post them in the group, and I'm sure they'll find their way over to me, and I'm happy to do what I can in order to answer any specific questions that arise on this. Not legal advice, of course, just information.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, because I keep forgetting about CCFR Answers, because I can only deal with what I'm dealing with.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Mike, and hopefully we'll get you back a little sooner next time for another update.
Happy to do it.
All right, joining me on Skype, I've got Tracy Wilson of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. Well said. There it is.
Oh boy, so much going on, eh?
What an insane country we're living in. As if you didn't know, we needed me to tell you that.
Try living in Ottawa, okay?
Well, we'll get to that. But the number one news right now: Erin O'Toole is out as Conservative Party leader.
Yes, breaking news. So Aaron O'Toole's team of members of parliament voted in a vote of 73 to 45 to end his leadership of the party. So that's shocking to me that it was that many voted against him. So that forced his resignation. He did submit it this afternoon to national office. And of course, now it's up to the members of parliament themselves will appoint an interim leader. Now, this is important. That interim leader can't run in the leadership according to the constitution of the party. So that's very important. Everyone's like, throw Pierre in or throw this person in or throw that person in. If you actually want that person to be the real leader of the party, then you don't want them to be the interim leader. So two things are coming up. You will have the appointment of an interim leader, I would assume probably within a day or two. And then, of course, they'll have to call for a leadership race. Who knows who's going to run? We don't have any signs or signals yet. The leadership or the convention, the policy convention, wasn't due until 2023. Of course, whether they move the convention up or just have a leadership race, they're going to have to do that sooner rather than later. So lots of stuff going on there.
Yeah, that's huge.
It's huge.
I don't want to comment too much on Aaron O'Toole or the whole topic, because it's not our job to elect a leader of the Conservative Party. Our job is to try to rally gun owners to support a party that has a chance to win, that will leave us alone, or even or follow through with common sense firearm regulation reform, right? Actual common sense, evidence-based, that we can all agree, like, yes, that's true, it's right there, kind of thing. That's our role. And I know some people get frustrated about that, but that's where we have to stay as an organization. It's important, right? So anyway, we'll see. Well, whoever the leader is, we'll have to support them the best we can, and hopefully it
just means another project, because of course now we'll be following a leadership race and sending out questionnaires and all the stuff we normally do for leadership. So
we definitely needed more projects. Well, there's other people out there that can take on that responsibility too. So we should have a big team. Next thing is Polly Sessevien and Wendy and a few other people got together on the anniversary of the mosque shooting and thought they would hold a virtual lobby day for parliamentarians and staffers and everybody, and lay out what their plan for the future of Canada looks like. So that was pretty interesting, hey?
Yeah, so of course this was held on the anniversary of the mosque shooting, but this wasn't, a memorial or a commemorative ceremony. This was directly a lobby meeting with parliamentarians, their staff, and the media. And the focus of it was, of course, to ask for a national handgun ban. Now that they've, been successful in achieving their, assaulty style rifle ban, whatever you want to call it, which has always been their focus. Now they're going to start moving down the line. So they're asking for a national handgun ban. Those gun owners out there who sat back and sort of watched the first ban happen and thought, well, maybe that doesn't really affect me. I don't own any of those rifles or shotguns that were banned. Guess what? It's coming down the line. So they're looking for a national handgun ban. They're looking for support from all parties for that. And then I imagine they'll continue on from there. Next thing you know, they'll be coming after the pump action shotguns and the lever actions. In any event, they did hold this lobby meeting. Of course, as you said, it was Polly Sessevien, the Coalition for Gun Control. There was reps from the Danforth Family for Safe Communities and reps from the Quebec City Mosque. So they'll never quit.
They'll just move on to the next more dangerous firearms until there's nothing left. And they prove that time and time again, especially with their rhetoric, as they want a ban on all guns, right? And they'll use any excuse. Right now, it's mass shootings, and just so people know, in the last 55 years, on average, 1.8 Canadians per year die in mass shootings. Like 1.8. It's about half or a third of the number of people that die from direct lightning strikes, right? And it's not that those people are not important. Absolutely, they are. And any death of an innocent person for no fault of their own is a tragedy. No one's ever disputed that. But your reaction has to be commensurate with the problem that you're facing. And that's true in every aspect of our society. You can't ban everything for any reason. You just can't do it. Or if you even disagree with people owning things. And you certainly can't take that approach to just things that are dangerous. We don't do it with cars or planes or gasoline or anything else. So it's anyway, just
right.
It is frustrating to watch. But speaking of frustrating, Wendy, who can always be relied upon, that whole group of these people can always be relied upon to be the most hyperbolic, completely disconnected from reality, pearl clutching, angry, hateful group of people.
100%.
And you can't even reason with them. We've tried. I always have my hand extended, like, hey, I'll forget everything that's been said, and we'll sit down like fellow Canadians and work on. No way. They're the most hateful group of people I've ever encountered, almost. But anyway, Wendy decided that she would take it to the next level. So we've got a video here to watch. So check it out.
And I would say that Quebec is unique because I think the population has been very mobilized around this issue. But when you see people in polls saying they support gun control, it doesn't necessarily translate into action. On the other hand, the gun lobby is very vocal, very well organized, and frankly, scary. And they followed people around on the election trail. They threatened members of parliament. They threatened just about anybody who speaks out on this issue. And even though there are only 2 million gun owners, 2 million altogether, and a fraction of them own handguns, they have a disproportionate amount of influence. And, you know, Heidi and I have been at this for more than 30 years. The evidence is clear. The experts support us. It's hard to think of another public policy issue where evidence and public opinion are so strongly aligned, and yet it doesn't translate into political action. And many Canadians know about the extent to which the NRA has hijacked the public safety agenda in the United States, but they're blissfully unaware of how effective the gun lobby has been, and frankly, how ineffective we have been in fighting for public safety. It's politics.
All right. So there's a lot. She can say a lot in a short period. She can do a lot of damage and spread a lot of hate in a very short period of time, as you well know. I mean, we've got memes of Wendy.
Oh, yes, I have been on the receiving end of it. So yes, I'm well aware of the hate that she can incite in Canadians.
Oh yeah. And in fact, I remember when I first saw her, actually it was the second time that I ever saw her in person, which was the Senate meetings for Bill C-71. I rolled in there, and it was Najma and Wendy and a few other these shifty characters. And I rolled up, and I was as nice as pie because we don't actually have to hate each other to be in a debate. And I rolled up and I said, "Hey, Wendy, how are you?" And they scowled at me. It
was the same at the summit on gun and gang violence in 2018.
Anyway,
yeah, it's crazy. I mean, we can have differing opinions on policy or different ideas about what would make Canadians safe, but it doesn't mean that you need to hate your fellow Canadians or try and get other people to hate
the smallest people ever. Anyway, so what of course Wendy, just goes on these diatribes. I think something's wrong with her. I think a lot of these folks, something's seriously wrong with them because they're so disconnected from reality. They just make up the most outrageous things and as if they're true, and they look at you with a straight face, like deadpan straight face. This happened. And you're like, I was there. That didn't happen. It's like, this happened. So she says that we are a scary group of people. I don't know if you're going to, get your attack chihuahua to bite anybody and prove how dangerous and scary we are.
We're terrible.
But she says that we threatened MPs and we threaten anyone who opposes us during the election.
If that's true, she should immediately call law enforcement because if somebody threatens another person, that's actionable. So she should be calling law enforcement. That's frustrating. I was listening in on the meeting and just taking some notes and whatever. And I'm sitting in the living room with the meeting playing, and she's talking like this, and my children are in the room. I mean, they're grown, but they hear this, and we're all looking at each other like, what? And they're like, did that happen? I'm like, of course it didn't happen. I mean, I don't know. And even to go on and say that the experts support her opinion, that's blatantly false, demonstrably false. That's easy to prove wrong. In fact, yesterday's SECU meeting was literal experts from law enforcement, from CBSA, RCMP, the National Police Federation, and nobody supports her opinion.
Yeah. So how many of them supported a ban? How many of them said when MPs?
Nobody.
Yeah. When MPs say, what do you need? Do you need more resources? Do you need more of this? Do you need more of that? Has anybody said we need a ban on all guns? We need a ban on assault style. Like
No.
who has said that openly?
Only them.
Yeah.
Only them. They're the only ones calling for it. This country, we have a limited amount of finite resources, and we got shootings going on in Toronto. I mean, I'm in a Twitter space last night, and there was more shootings in Toronto than there's been violence in the streets of Ottawa in 5 days of protesting. I mean, I feel like it's like being in an alternate universe with these people, because the stuff that comes out of their mouth and the reality of the situation are two completely different things. And it's terrifying, actually. Talk about scary. That's scary.
Well, it is.
That somebody can lie so
And
freely.
it just never ends with them. And of course, you had to bring up the NRA, because what conversation about Canadian firearm regulations, can't benefit from some NRA reference. And then she talks about why we're so effective versus how ineffective they are. And you know what? I'll tell you this, and I'll give her the secret, is if you don't want to be so stinking ineffective, stop lying to people and gaslighting them and calling them every name that you can come up with, and white supremacists and racists and misogynists and Islamophobes. And, Bill Blair tried that, and he had a very short stint as Minister of Public Safety, and he'll go down, in my opinion, as the worst minister in the history of government ministers in our country. Like, he's just a deplorable, detestable individual, the way that he labeled Canadians and tried to promote hate against people and said completely untrue things. Like this style of politics has its benefits. Like, Trudeau has benefited very, very significantly from causing people, lying to them and causing them to hate others. Like, he stayed in power. He had 18% of Canadians vote for him in the last election, 15 or 18% of them. But it was enough to stay in power. So even though what he's doing is horribly corrosive, is morally objectionable, it's morally disdainful, it works for him as an individual and for his people. And I know the anti-gun lobby people, they're like, this is our ticket, right? This is our train that's going to get us where we need to be. But at some point, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and go, okay, am I a horrible person? Or can I have a conversation with do other people count other than me? And, I always remind myself of that everyone has a right to sit at this table. That's why I continue to offer to them, like, hey, let's sit down and talk together. We're in this together. Yeah. I don't want my kids walking around in a world where they could be shot with a gun. I don't want them to do that either, right? So I'm sure that we can find something in common. No way. You oppose me, and you are less than, you're an animal. It's got to stop. This is why they're losing.
It does.
Well, I wouldn't say they're losing because they got Trudeau right now, but God help them if Trudeau's not in power anymore, because they're going to lose big. So anyway.
Big.
All right. So the next thing, it's interesting. I've tried to steer clear. And, I know this frustrates people. We try to steer clear of a lot of other issues. Everyone wants to hitch their wagon to the CCFR and wants the CCFR to hitch their wagon to them. But as you well know, Wilson, I try to be very disciplined in that the reason why people support the CCFR is that we are focused on firearm rights. We try not to, I know we do personally a little bit, moving because we're Canadians, we're here, but we try to stay focused on our topic so that it doesn't get tainted with any other issue, because that's important. It's important that that the media and, God help them, that the media or anybody else is able to call the CCFR and be like, I want a comment on the gun issue, and for them to get exactly what
Right.
they expect from us. And that's it. That's why people support us. But anyway, it is interesting. I mean, we can chat about it a little bit. It is interesting how the trucker convoy has come across the country, has made its way to Ottawa, and now they're experiencing what gun owners have experienced for how long now?
Well, it's always been this way, right? And I mean, I think when you have people who behave badly, those people should be held to account. And I think, we always say I don't support group punishment. If somebody does something wrong, you can't blame all gun owners when one person, licensed or not, does something wrong. And yet the convoy rolls into town. There's been, at the time of recording this, I think there's been a third arrest, but originally there was 2 arrests. Both of them are local people here in Ottawa. And of course, a couple of fringe people who have done, flown flags or done whatever. And then the media has painted the entire convoy, the thousands of people that have descended upon Ottawa, the millions of people across the country and globally who are supporting them, painted them all as some kind of racist unacceptables. I don't know. But it is an interesting parallel because the same thing happens to gun owners, right? So it's been really interesting. I'll tell you a little story. I'm not going to talk too long about it, but I'll tell you a little story. I was listening to our local talk radio news station here in Ottawa, CFRA, and Leslie Robertson from CTV hosts part of the talk news program, and he had former OPP Commissioner Chris Lewis on today. And he had a number of guests talking about the protest and the impacts on the city itself. I mean, it's one thing to look at it online, but there are those of us who actually live here, and there are some impacts on certain areas of the city. So he's talking to Chris Lewis, who of course is CTV's crime specialist, and he's on there all the time talking about different issues when it comes to crime. And they were saying, well, what would it take to get this convoy out of here? And, how would we do that? And he's starting to talk about some of the tactical, elements of this, because you've got a bunch of different people. You've got, a whole load of actual truckers who came from out west and out east. You've got some fringe elements. You've got local people who are supporting the convoy. There's families down there. I'm sure there's some bad apples among them. There's people who are not part of the convoy, but who have traveled from all around just to come and see it. So there's a lot of different groups, and they're doing a lot of intel online and watching all the different groups and conversations and watching for threats. And in that conversation, Lewis mentioned how, they don't really know everybody who's involved with this. They're collecting all that intel, and they have to make sure you can't just storm into the Capitol, grab all these people and start arresting them and dragging their trucks out, right? It's you don't want to cause a riot. And, you don't know who's got what or if anyone has any weapons. So he thanks Leslie Robertson thanks Chris for his input as a crime specialist, and he finishes his segment. And then Leslie turns, back to the microphone, and now he's alone on the radio speaking to the people of Ottawa. And in fact, this is a nationally broadcasted news channel. And he says, well, there you have it. Police are trying to determine how many of the truckers are armed. We have to be very careful with armed truckers. And I'm listening to it, and I almost spit my coffee out. I was like, what? I literally listened to the entire segment with Chris Lewis, who had some very good insight on how to do crowd control and how to avoid causing a riot and the things that are important to keep this a safe and peaceful protest. And he gets off the radio, and Leslie Roberts turns to saying the words armed truckers. And you have to think, not everybody listening to that show, in fact, the majority of people listening to it, wouldn't have experience with firearms or understand the firearms laws or what it takes to actually acquire a gun in Canada legally or whatever. So now you have people listening to this radio show thinking, what? The truckers are armed? And of course, now it is coming into my lane, right? And I'm like, I can't believe it. So we had some back and forth on Twitter, and Chris Lewis actually chimed in on our Twitter conversation. And I just said, what I said to him, I fully understand that law enforcement needs to have the intel and needs to find those things out. However, the moment you say armed truckers with nothing behind it, no evidence that that's true, the moment you say that on the radio to the public, that's incitement. You're causing problems. You're throwing fuel on the fire. There's no reason to put that type of imagery into people's minds when that's not happening, right? So,
well, yeah.
Anyways, just to really, it's difficult being here, and I'm trying to stay out of the entire debate about it. But it's just interesting to see the parallels between people who are basically just opposing government's overreach, regardless of what it's about. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Armed truckers, and
armed
it's
truckers.
and
Like,
there's
what?
all this media, and they always do this. It's funny. They're just as disconnected as a lot of people, I think. And they're, it's like people are interfering with their ability to report on things because they know the convoy is going to be vilified no matter if there's 5 bad people out of 10,000. I mean, we had them do it to us, of course, right? It's like hundreds of people gather in Parliament. It was like 5,000 people. We have drone footage from the sky over, you know what I mean? Like, we know how many people were there. And it's like, no, nobody else was there. They're only getting their news from us. We'll just tell them there was hundreds of people there. No one will ever know the difference. Most people didn't. But yeah, I mean, they do that that stuff to us all the time, and just get that narrative out there, and they wonder why people are so angry at the media. And then when people get angry and they interfere or they, swear at them or whatever, they're like, where's this coming from? Where did this anger come from?
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, well, what do you think? Where do you think it came from? In a vacuum? It just showed up. They're just bad people, drive trucks. It's just so terrible. Such a disservice.
Well, and it's like living in a parallel universe, because if you turn on any news channel in the country, of course they're covering covering what's going on here in Ottawa, and it gives you one sort of image of it, and you're watching it horrified, like, oh my God, this is horrible and violent, and oh my goodness, and then you go to social media and you see people reporting, like literally everybody is media now. If you've got an iPhone, you are the media. And you see all these videos, and they're playing hockey, and they're cooking pizzas for the homeless,
shoveling
and they're
sidewalks,
cleaning up the streets.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know. I don't know where this is all going to go. I think, if anything, these last 5 days in Ottawa have really, we've known there's media bias. We know it full well. But I think this is, if anything comes out of this, it'll show how badly the media has become activists instead of journalists. And it is no wonder that they're all posting these videos like, look at these people yelling at me, calling me fake news and telling me to get out of here. They won't do an interview. Well, no wonder, because your job is to go out there and vilify them, and you expect them just to take it. I don't know.
Their job isn't to do that. It's actually the opposite. It's just to show people what's going on, but they've made that their job. So it's, I don't know. It's things are changing fast in our country, and the sooner that we can get back to some sense of normalcy, the sooner cooler heads will prevail, and we can kind of work on our problems the way we used to, and try to have conversations and stuff. But anyway, thanks for coming on, and it was a big podcast, and the next one's going to be just as big, because a lot of stuff will happen between now and then too. So, awesome. Keep up the great work, Tracy.
All right, stay safe.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 108 of the CCFR Radio podcast. Thanks everyone for your support. As you know, we've got a lot of projects going. We've got the big legal case going. The invoices are coming fast and furious, and they're not going to let up anytime soon. So if you're not a member of the CCFR, please continue or consider becoming a member. You can do that at firearmrights.ca. If you got a couple of bucks, you can help us out with these legal costs and costs of some of the other projects that we're doing, National Range Day, television shows, you name it. We're doing as much as we possibly can, everything we could possibly think of to protect your ability to own and use firearms. I don't know if we're going to be able to do it, because we only control so much, but we're not going to lose our guns because of lack of trying. So anyway, if you appreciate that, and you can see your way to becoming a member. You can do that at firearmrights.ca. You can also donate. We really appreciate all your support. Make sure you share this podcast. If you can't do anything, because these are tough times, they're crazy times and they're tough times. And if you're not in a position to help us financially, just share the podcast. Tell other gun owners to be a member of the CCFR. Maybe just talk to other gun owners about why they should get interested in what's going on politically, why it's in their best interest to get involved in whatever way they can. That is just as important as donating. Okay, so we all got to pull together, and we got to do everything we can, because we're losing our stuff. And so we just got to continue to put the big effort in. Anyway, thanks so much, everyone, for your support. Thanks, Mike Loberg, for all of your work. It's greatly appreciated. Thanks, Tracy Wilson. Take care, and we'll see you in the next episode.
This is another episode of the CCFR Radio Podcast. Remember, if you don't stand up for your own ability to own and use firearms, who will? Join the CCFR or donate right now at www.firearmrights.ca.